of all, thank you very much for attending this session. I feel very privileged to be spending the next 2 hours with such a distinguished panel, addressing an issue that's really becoming a key business influencer as well as a driver. And this is on the issue of demographics. I think for those of you who attended yesterday's session, you heard from various people, including Professor Fukuyama, who also addressed the issue of the future impact of demographics. So today, with this panel, we will be hearing not from the policymakers or from the supply side, the academic institutions, but mostly from the demand side, the corporations. So what are the companies doing to address the issue of demographics? I think it's true to say that as anywhere else in the world, Asia Pacific is also experiencing a decline in birth rate. And not just the decline in birth rate, but simultaneously there's an improvement in life expectancy. So by putting these two together, Asia Pacific is aging in a very fast pace. And therefore, as a region, I think we need to recognize this as a key economic and social issue that's going to impact many of us as we do business into the 21st century. The impact of the demographic trend is going to affect some countries more negatively compared to others. And you will see from our panelists later on how each of the countries are dealing with the different aspect of the aging. All over Asia, as we go around and talk to companies and executives, one common theme that we hear is how they're going to attract and retain talent. And these are not just young workers, but young and old workers alike. Therefore, decision makers, both at the company level and the government levels, cannot ignore the impact of, or the seriousness of the problems that will be caused by the shift in demographics. If there is one message that I would like you to take away from today's presentation, is that the impact of demographics is not a myth. It's a reality. And you will see from our speakers today how each of the companies are addressing the issue of demographics. Asia is going to be the home of the largest proportion of older workers over the next 30 years. And this means that both the employees will have to assume greater responsibility in terms of how they plan their own retirement, which is going to be soon for many of us. And for the Asian employers, the companies will have to develop and implement new strategies to develop and manage their aging workforce. However, the aging factor is not just contained to Asia Pacific. If we look at the EU community, for example, they expect that by the year 2030, there's going to be some 20 million workers that's going to be short. So where will these 20 million workers come from to cover the European bloc? One fact that I'm sure you've all seen and heard before is that the Asian population is increasing. By the year 2050, mid-century, Asia Pacific will have a population of about 3.8 billion. And of the 3.8 billion, 77% of Asia's population will reside in these two countries. I'm sure you can guess which those are: India and China. And about 11% will come from Indonesia and Japan. But the Asian population isn't just aging, isn't just growing, it's also aging very fast. And as I said before, this is primarily due to the increased life expectancy combined with declining fertility ratio. Now if you look at the chart here, it stops at 2050, mid-century. But if we were to continue the chart until the end of the century, where will the life expectancy be? Will we be looking forward to live beyond 100 years, 200 years, or even 1,000 years? Earlier this morning, we heard from Professor William Halal that by the year 2030, there's a 30% expectancy ratio that many of us will live 100 years or beyond. And if that's going to be the case, what impact is that going to bring to us as individuals as we plan our lives beyond retirement, as well as for the companies in terms of how they're going to deal with this factor? This chart is a little bit graphic, and I don't know how well those in the back can see, but there's just one point to this chart, and that is that the aging factor in Asia Pacific is becoming very diverse. I mean, you will see that it's a very diverse age profile, and there are distinctively two groups of countries emerging in Asia Pacific. One is a group that is more affluent and growing older fast. And these are the ones that you see with the arrows. And the countries are Australia, China, Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, Korea, and Taiwan. On the other hand, you have a group of countries that are less affluent and younger. And these are countries like India, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. One exception to the chart here is that China, while is less affluent, is already entering into its middle age. And workforces in Japan and China will start to shrink in the next decade. And I would include Korea in here as well. With this increased profile of aging issues in the corporate sector, Watson Wyatt recently conducted a survey spanning 11 countries, and we went and talked to over 2,300 executives. And we asked them, what are some of the things that is really critical to your business going forward, and what type of demographic issues are you concerned about? And over 60% of the executives responded by saying that aging population is really one of the top issues that they are concerned about and will begin to address. So I think this comes back to the first point where I made that demographic issues is not a myth anymore. It's a reality, and companies are beginning to address those. And just to share with you just a little bit more on the research findings, and I won't go through all of these, 48% of the surveyed employers felt that there will be a labor shortage in Asia Pacific due to demographic changes. And that the demographic changes will have serious impact, not just on the economy, but on society as a whole. It's about 64%. And more importantly, as we live longer, healthcare and retirement benefits are deemed unsustainable. And nearly 50% of our respondents agreed to this. We also asked our executives who participated in the survey how much of the healthcare costs have significantly affected their business over the last 3 years. And nearly one-third, over 20%, stated that it has significantly increased. Now, one thing that I noted from this particular question, and you will see from here, is that India responded by saying that their healthcare costs really increased significantly over the last 3 years. you see 37% responded. The Philippines, 42% of the respondents said healthcare costs really dramatically increased. And I was just talking to our panelist yesterday, and I asked him, how do you think this is if you were to look at it from your country-specific examples? And from India, our representative from Wipro said, from his own country, company perspective, in terms of the healthcare cost, 70% of his healthcare cost is driven by maternity benefits. And that speaks to high fertility rates in India. Then I asked our speaker from the Philippines, and what about you? What is driving your healthcare costs? And he said, well, it's the cost of dependence. Again, extended large families. Another question that I want to share with you is the supplementary health benefits and its impact on attracting and retaining the right talent. As many of your workforces age, or as many as, and if they're young and beginning to have families, by providing more healthcare benefits, will it help you to attract and to retain the right talent? And you can see from this chart that nearly 50% of the respondents stated that yes, it is a competitive advantage to offer different healthcare benefits. And again, you can see countries like Indonesia, where about 70% said it did affect the companies in retaining the right talent. So, what are the leading companies doing to manage the demographic tide? It could be mitigating risk, or it could be taking advantage of the opportunities that the shift in demographics propose. So today, let me introduce to you the four distinguished speakers who will speak from both sides of the continuum. So we have two speakers who will talk about the impact of aging. And that would be from Japan and from China. So from a country perspective and a company perspective, what are they doing to mitigate the risk of aging? What programs are they introducing to the company? On the other hand, we will also hear from two companies that have relatively young workers and a very good supply of young workers. And this will be from the Philippines and from India. And to give you a little bit of introduction to our speakers, I will just go through alphabetical order. Representing the AYALA Corporation from the Philippines is Mr. John Philip Orbeta. He's currently the managing director at the AYALA Corporation and the group head for strategic human resources and organizational development. He has the operating HR responsibility for the AYALA Corporation in all human capital management. Prior to joining the AYALA group, Mr. Orbeta spent close to 20 years at a global human capital consulting firm, Wyatt, in a variety of positions. Moving on down to the Boeing company, I'm very delighted to have Mr. Timothy Lynch. He became Boeing's international regional human resources leader for Asia in May 2004. In this position, he supports all Boeing employees and business entities throughout Asia Pacific. Mr. Lynch comes to Boeing after having spent more than 5 years with KPMG. And here he worked in various capacity in several Asian countries. And then moving and representing BT Japan, I'm also very delighted to have Mr. Koshiro Kitazato, who now serves as the chairman of BT Japan. He is also a member of BT Global Advisory Board, and he's also the non-executive representative director of KDDI and BT Global Solutions Corporation. He has extensive experiences in global business planning, and prior to BT, he worked for Fujitsu Limited for over 37 years. Last but not least, I'm also very delighted to introduce our speaker who represents Wipro Technologies from India, Mr. Pratik Kumar, who is the Executive Vice President of the Human Resources. And he has been an HR practitioner over 19 years. And under Mr. Pratik's leadership, Wipro achieved the distinction of becoming the first organization in the world to be assessed at level 5 of People Capability Maturity Model Framework of Software Engineering Institute given out by Carnegie Mellon University. So without much ado, let me turn over to our speakers. Each of the speakers will speak about 15 to 20 minutes, and we would like to leave some sufficient time for us to have some Q&A. So let me introduce our first speaker from Japan, Mr. Kitazato, to talk about the situation in Japan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chuly. Good afternoon. I'm very delighted to be here today to speak to you about our challenge in the world's fastest aging country, Japan. This is a very timely topic now, particularly for Asian countries. I would like to congratulate Korean government, academic and industry leaders in organizing such inspiring forum to discuss our common goals of how we will attract talented resources from the competitive market. Today I would like to talk about the projection of the Japanese aging society in a bit more detail and what kind of impact we will be getting from this trend, how we are dealing with the dilemmas, and what will be the way forward for us. I'd also like to include some flexible working systems of the BT's experience for your future reference. Let me first talk about the situation in Japan in relation to the populations and demography. This chart is a very shocking chart for Japanese. This shows the Japanese total population from 800 to 2,100. The Japanese population will peak out in 2000 at 127 million people, and then go down rapidly. In 2100, the population will go down as far as 82 million in high variant, and in the low variant up until 46 million. So in 100 years, Japanese population will come down to the level of around 100 years ago. And I have not found another interesting data. We will have only one Japanese national in the world in the age of 3,300. And it's a ridiculous calculation. But National Institute of Population officially posted it in the website, so you can access it. This is the official projection of the National Institute of Population of Japan, that we will have only one Japanese So this is a very serious matter for us. We cannot just stay around without any positive actions. This shows the change of the demographic structure from 1930 to 2030. We had a very balanced pyramid of GDP in 1930, but in 2000, the middle age portion became bigger and the younger age portion became smaller. So the pyramid became very unstable, and here to 2030, the structure becomes very top-heavy. So the portion of the older people will become very big, and that is causing big issues for us. And then I'd like to show how the populations over 65 years old has grown and will grow in future. In 1950, we had about 4.9% of the 65 years, over 65 years old, but in 2005, 19.7%, and in 2050, we will go up to 35.9%. So 1 out of 3 persons will be over 65 years old. Then let's compare Japan with other countries in the percentage of the population aged over 65 years old. Other countries which shows sharp growth, the population aged over 65 years old will be the Korea and Singapore. Korea starts from the 9.4%, and in 2050 the population will go up to 35%. So almost similar to Japan, but the rate of the change is faster than Japan. And Singapore the same trend from 8.5 31%. If you compare this with the UK, currently they are 16%, still already high, but the growth will be quite gradual, because in 2050 the rate will be 23%. This shows the mapping of the working populations between 15 and 64 against the age populations of the aged 65 and over, and oldest population aged 75 and over, and the children population. You can see the decline of the working population against the sharp increase of the aged population and oldest population. So, what kind of issues we will have with this aging society? As an immediate impact of the aging society, we will have a 2007 issue. Called year 2007 issue. In Japan, baby boomers will start to reach retirement age of 60 in 2007, next year. Baby boomers in Japan were born in 1947 to 1949, just after the end of the World War II. That amounts to about 8 million people. So what is a negative impact on that? The baby boomers is a supporter, hero of the group of the people who supported the growth of Japan and success of Japan in the past, and especially in the development of the IT society or supporting IT systems widely spread in industry and individual. So biggest concern is raised whether we will have sufficient support capabilities if they leave in 2007 or so. Another concern is that whether knowledge transfer from the senior people to younger people generation will be made smoothly if senior people leave or advance. So in Japan, the new law was enforced in April this year, so that the Japanese company will launch a rehiring scheme or extension of the current employment or abolish the retirement age. So these are already being taken by the major company in Japan. On the other hand, there are some positive or optimistic view about the baby boomers leaving next year. One of those is that substantial cost saving might be achieved by the retirement of baby boomers. That is a cost, positive effect. Other positive aspect will be that baby boomers maybe create a new lifestyle because they work so hard. They don't like to continue to work and they like to develop a new style of work, a new style of lifestyle, and a new opportunity for the new wave of consumption will be generated by them. So we don't know what will happen, but not necessarily all are pessimistic view. And interestingly, baby boomers junior, children of the baby boomers who have come to the age of 25 years or 30 are now reading a new style of consumption. So these are the unknown factor for us. So what is important is to manage this change very smoothly. That is the key. More serious matter is a shortage of the young workers and the new graduates. Shortage of the executive managers, skilled people in global business operations, technical software development, high-tech work. Because of the shortage of the young people, the competition for hiring the new graduate becomes very keen. And this is causing a difficulty in maintaining a good growth plan for the total employment structure. So what will be the ultimate effect on the long-term basis? Because of the difficulty of hiring the young people, the traditional Japanese employment system, which are based on seniority or lifetime employment, will be collapsing. This is considered a negative way in Japan, but I think this will be, in other words, a positive trigger to a new flexible employment system in the world in the age of the globalization. And I think Japan will be moving toward age-free and more mobility employment market. Then, what will be the key driver for the transformation of the Japanese employment system? I think there are three key words. One is diversity, flexibility, and innovation. Three of them are all correlated. Japan used to be a homogeneous society. Because of the homogeneous society, it was easier for people to communicate within society, and key supporting members of society, particularly industry, for men, Japanese national, and the senior managers supported by young workers. Participation of the women, particularly management, have been quite low. And foreigners were employed only for limited purpose. So we now also have a new group of new aged people after normal retirement age. So our future focus should be diversity in hiring more women, more foreign people, more aged people, positively. And that will be the most effective driver for radical transformation in Japan. I think that way. To accommodate the diversity, it will be important to develop flexibility in working and employment systems. Innovations in IT and communication will enable diversity in employment, flexible working, and work style. So these three are correlated with each other. I think the business industry leaders in Japan now are aware of this matter for the future driver. Whether the speed for transformation is fast enough, I don't think so. Still, there are a group gap between the fast movers and slow movers. If I was asked who are the champions for diversity, I will say it will be Nissan. Nissan was revived by the foreign CEO, Carlos Ghosn, French Lebanese, and his key strategy was diversity. So I think he's leading the Japanese diversity management, and there are lots of voice from industry that we should have another Carlos Ghosn for Japan. And one of the action taken by the Japanese new Prime Minister, Abe, was innovation. He visualized Japanese society in 2025, which he emphasized that innovation to be developed to achieve these objectives. Now I turn to the experience of BT in flexible working. I have been with British Telecom for more than 10 years, including my role as the CEO of BT Japan. I'm very interested and impressed with the way they are handling the employees and customers. So I'd like to share some of the salient points of BT's flexible working as a model for the future working system. BT's flexible working started 1986. It's 20 years ago, to attract talented people from the market. So at that time, management thought this is a quite important matter to attract talented people from the market. BT has total employee of 100,000 in the world, and out of that 10%, 10,000 employees are home-based working. And occasional home-based working will be about 70%, so 70,000 employees are working occasionally home-based, including myself. And the important principle is that whether home-based or the office-based, the payment will be equal because it will be decided by performance. Within the company, various facilities such as hot desk, audio, video conferences, broadband-enabled facilities, easy working, are provided for the home-based workers. And as flexible employment systems, several menus are provided to the employees to their option to choose. Those are the ones listed here, like compressed time, job sharing, time banking, limited working, freedom to work, flexible retirement is down, step down, helping unemployment down. And last month, October 1st, no retirement by age was introduced, but with the implementation of the employment equity age regulations. What kind of achievement actually made with this flexible working? BT measure all these in numbers. 20% less absenteeism than the national average was achieved. And home-based workers, this is a bit wrong, 7%, sorry, 17% is a bit, this is a typographical error, 7% happier than site-based workers. And travel savings, 1,800 years commuting, reduced travel costs of £9.7 million a year, and reduced costs, the office cost per one worker is £15,000 per workers. And improved retention, 98% of the women return to the BT after maternity leave, saving £5 million a year recruitment and induction costs. Interestingly, this also reduced 54,000 tons of CO2 emissions and 12 million liters of carbon. So this is also social and society friendly. And the message from the BT flexible workers said, in today's recruitment market, flexible working isn't an option, it's a necessity, a crucial weapon in the war of talent. I'm sure in Japan we are trying to introduce this concept because of the difference of the environment. We cannot introduce everything into the Japanese market, but we are in the same direction to implement this systems. In summary, I think Japan is moving toward an age-free society with more mobility in the employment market. Japan's option is to accept diversity with more women, foreign people, and new age people. We should aim at higher productivity, securing those diverse people. For that purpose, Japan will need support from Asian countries in getting talented people in global operation, technical development, support, or manufacturing, or services. So in recent Nikkei article, I noted a very interesting article describing the Japanese high-tech companies such as Fujitsu, Hitachi, or Toshiba, NEC, in hiring thousands of Indian software engineers from IT system development. And there are also articles for certifying foreign elder care specialists and nurses for Japanese aging population. So those moves are already happening. I believe that flexible working will be an important weapon for attracting talented people from the market. We'd like to learn from the experience of cooperation. Japan has a dilemma of a low fertility and the world's highest life expectancy, which is causing the world's fastest aging society. Japan should meet the challenge for setting up a model of the future aging society by introducing radical transformation into the country. I'm sure business leaders and policymakers are aware of this. We should do what we should do will be to gear up for further acceleration for transformation. In this regard, I believe that it is important for Koreans in Japan to work together for the common goals. Thank you very much.
Chuly, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you to the organizers who invited Boeing to come here and present on this very important topic. My name is Tim Lynch, and I am the Regional HR Director for Boeing here in Asia. I've been working in Asia since 1995, for, as earlier mentioned, KPMG, and now for the Boeing company. I'd like to just briefly bring you through the agenda of what I'm going to talk about today. I'd like to give you an introduction of the Boeing company and our global scope. Next, I'd like to talk about Boeing in China. And then I'd like to wrap up with talking about employees in the 21st century. So to start off with, Boeing is the world's leading aerospace company, and we are the largest manufacturer of commercial and military aircraft combined. Boeing also has a long tradition of aerospace leadership and innovation. And if you take a look at the slide, you'll get a greater idea of actually our scope globally. First, in terms of revenue, in 2005, we had close to $55 billion coming from customers in 145 countries. I'll note that 30% of that was international. Also, in terms of the size of our employees, we have over 150,000 employees in 48 states and over 70 countries. In addition, we have over 6,000 suppliers in more than 100 countries. And in addition, we have research, design, and technology centers throughout the world, including manufacturing, service, and technology partnerships. And I'd also like to point out that we are one of the largest U.S. exporters. So that leads us into what Boeing does today. In addition to designing and manufacturing commercial jetliners, we're also involved in providing satellites, launch vehicles, military aircraft. We also integrate large-scale systems and develop network-centric solutions. We also provide financial solutions to our customers, and we're also very keen, of course, on developing advanced technology defining the future of aerospace. So in summary, basically what Boeing does is we connect and protect people. So I think that leads us into the Boeing company culture. And what's most important to Boeing is our employees, because basically that's where our company's strength and competitive advantage comes from. We're continuously striving to improve the quality of work and the quality of life for our employees, and we're always encouraging a strong work-life balance. In particular, I'd like to point out to you one such program where we're particularly proud of, and as an HR practitioner, I'm extremely proud of, and that's our Learning Together program. The Learning Together program is open to all employees in the company. So whether you're entry level or you're Jim McNerney, our CEO, everybody can apply to the Learning Together program. And what that allows you to do is basically apply for degrees at outside universities to help you with your work, to improve your knowledge and your skill sets. In 2005, 1,654 undergraduate, graduate, and advanced degrees were gained by Boeing employees. And right now we have more than 22,000 employees that are enrolled in degree programs. And these programs are supported by Boeing. These are open not only to our U.S. staff, but our staff worldwide. So whether you're in China or in Korea and you work for Boeing, everyone's eligible for the Learning Together program. I would also point out that Boeing has invested over $91 million in 2005 alone for the Learning Together program. In addition, we have some other great employee building tools within the company. One is the Boeing Leadership Center, and that's located in St. Louis, Missouri in the United States. And this is a knowledge center that the company uses and that we send employees from around the world to learn, grow, and interact with fellow Boeing employees. So we have a variety of different courses which are taught not only by outside instructors but also by Boeing employees themselves. So it's not surprising to be able to go there and find members of our leadership within Boeing actually teaching these courses to fellow employees. In addition, we have a great program that we call Pride at Boeing, And it's an award system in which employees can actually give awards to other employees. So this program also is another worldwide program. So I've seen some great examples of where we had someone who was working for Boeing in Hong Kong who was awarded a private Boeing award from the employees in Boeing India, for example. So it's another great program that we offer, and it's a great way of recognizing good work within the company. In addition, of course, besides our Boeing Leadership Center, we also try to include other leadership and training opportunities for our employees. One of the most recent ones that we had in China was entitled the Boeing China Leadership Training Program, in which we were trying to grow leaders, young leaders from within our company to become the future of Boeing in China. In addition, we have great internship programs. Most recently here in Korea, we wrapped up our internship program through the Boeing Korea office, which we do every year. Okay, now that I've kind of given you an idea of Boeing, the company, worldwide, I'd like to talk a little bit about Boeing in China. And as you can see from the map, Boeing is quite extensive and has quite a presence in China. You'll see that we're located not only in major cities like, for example, Beijing or Shanghai or Guangzhou, but we have people located throughout major airports. We also actually have a number of suppliers in China, so we have a number of quality assurance people who are located in China. And then, of course, we have our general support staff who are also located there to make sure that employees that are working there can get the job done. So a little more detail about Boeing in China. You can see from the slide that basically the businesses that are included there include government affairs, our commercial airplane sales, marketing, business development, our commercial aviation services, our supplier management, and of course our communications team. In total, we have 170 employees working in China for Boeing, and most are located at the airlines and our supplier factories, as I mentioned before. In addition, there are over 3,100 employees at Boeing-related businesses, and as I mentioned earlier, we're involved in financing of planes also, and we have a Boeing Capital office located in Hong Kong. So now I'd like to switch gears and talk a little bit about Boeing China's current market outlook. And as you can see from the slide, over the next 20 years, we're forecasting a lot of growth in China. To begin with, you'll notice that China has one of the fastest growing markets for us. They're going to need over 2,800 new aircraft, worth over $280 billion, basically making it the largest market outside the United States for us. Airplanes will continue, the fleets for these airplanes will continue to grow to over 3,900 units, more than tripling by 2025. I also want to mention here that airline traffic will continue to grow, partially because of reasons like a growing internal customer base, as more and more people are able to fly, and also a growing external tourist base, which is fueled by events such as the 2008 Olympics. In addition, you'll notice towards the bottom, we point out that China's domestic market is expected to average 8.8% annual growth. And also, not only do we sell commercial airplanes, but we also sell freighter airplanes. So we're looking to add an extra 260 freighter airplanes by 2025. I just want to share with you a snapshot of Boeing's supplier network in China. And the reason for that is because we really like to build teamwork with our suppliers. And those people that we include as part of our team, you can see on the screen there. I would point out some large, some big companies I'm sure you're aware of, like General Electric, Korean Aerospace Industries, Pratt & Whitney, and Rolls-Royce. So these are our partners in China. I'll note that new work for our new plane, the 787, and of course the 777 and the 737 contracted for in June 2005 has a value of over $600 million over the lifetime of the planes and the programs. In addition, we have a number of joint ventures also in China and facilities. So we've listed a couple of them up there in Xiamen and in Tianjin. We have a new joint venture that's coming out in Shanghai with the Shanghai Airport Group and Shanghai Airlines for plane modification. We also have subsidiaries in China like Ultion, where we provide pilot training. We also have an Ultion site here in Korea. And of course we have a spare center. We've also established a great executive development program for our suppliers and also for airline customers and for the CAAC, which is the General Administration of Civil Aviation of China. And we began these executive development programs back in 1998. In addition, Boeing sponsors 200 CAAC and airline personnel for MBA degrees. So not only are we sponsoring our own staff, but we're also helping other people within the industry. So we're looking to build strong relationships and teamwork within these groups. Okay, so now that you have an idea of who Boeing is and what Boeing does in China, I'd like to speak specifically about the demographic of age and how it's going to affect Boeing in China and also Boeing worldwide as a company. As we can see from this chart, which takes place in 2002, you'll see that places like China, Korea, and the United States, the percentage of individuals aged over 60 years of age is between 10 to 19% of the population. By 2050, we see quite a shift. Basically, those countries I mentioned before, like China and Korea, are going from a 10 to 19% to a 30+% change in population. The same is true for Europe, and also in the United States, there's also an aging population. So I think the first question we have to ask here in terms of this aging workforce is, how does this affect the aerospace business in general? And we see two trends that are happening. The first is that, of course, there's the aging workforce, and there's going to be a loss of experience and knowledge by that aging workforce when they retire. And the second trend we see is whether, and one that we're concerned about, is whether or not the educational systems will develop the right people who have the right creative thinking and skills to fill all the job openings that we're going to have. So if we get a little more specific and look at the impact on Boeing itself, i.e. Boeing China and Boeing the company, here's a great statistic. Aging is actually extremely important. This issue is a tremendous issue for us. 60,000 of our employees will be eligible to retire in the next 5 years. And as I mentioned before, we have just over 150,000. So you're talking about close to 28% of our workforce is reaching the retirement age in our company. Okay. Now we know that all of them, of course, are not going to retire at that time. Okay. But with the continued decline in the number of engineers graduating each year, we wonder if we will be able to find the talent we need 5 to 10 years from now. So for us, this is an issue that's kind of slowly knocking on the door. So the next question is, how are we as a company going to prepare for that? Well, first, we recognize the critical role that mentoring has in our company, and we are planning to roll out a company-wide mentoring program this winter. Today, we have smaller mentoring programs, and we recognize the need to build on these programs. Mentoring is one of the best ways for us to help assimilate new workers into the corporate culture, and also ensure that that knowledge from those people that are retiring are passed on to the new workforce that we have. Number two, another area that we're looking at, or actually we've already started, is working with outside groups to help bring our retirees back to work at Boeing as consultants. So we're actually looking at both ends here, people coming in, and can we actually help to extend people who are staying with the company. We believe that this is going to be an important partnership because these outside groups will be carrying on the administrative issues that come with rehiring these employees. Third thing we're trying to do, of course, is build stronger relationships with universities. And we're also going forward with the creation of internship programs, not just with Boeing in the United States, but Boeing worldwide. And as I mentioned, we already have one here in Korea. So we feel it's very important to build strong relationships and partnerships with universities so that we can get the right people. The fourth point I'd like to bring up is it's important for us to continue to build on our great culture at Boeing. I discussed about it before, and I think it's important that as we continue to have that culture, we are the type of company that attracts people to come and work for us. We find that we are an employer of choice, and we would like to continue that. I stand up here today to tell you I'm a proud Boeing employee because that's how I feel. I'm very glad to be an employee of Boeing, as do the 150,000 plus people that work for us. So I think this is a great way of capturing actually the shared challenge that we have here at Boeing, Boeing China, Boeing throughout the world. Great quote by a gentleman by the name of Joseph Legowski where he says, "We are attempting to educate students today so that they will be ready to solve future problems that have not yet been identified using technologies not yet invented based on significant knowledge that has not yet discovered." Okay? So that just shows you the challenge that our company has. We're looking for thinkers and problem solvers. Of course, we're looking for good, strong graduates from universities, but we want to go beyond that. And I'd also like to tie in how it's important for us, as I mentioned the mentoring program before, to tie that back in. As we have people who are retiring and we have new groups coming in, we want to have that knowledge transfer so that people understand that Boeing is an innovative company, we believe in our employees, and we want to pass that on to the next generation that comes in. So I think this leads us into my final slide, which is about the type of people that we are looking for. And I just wanted to briefly wrap up with employees in the 21st century for Boeing. As you can see there, I think the first bullet point I bring up is we're looking for people who are capable of economic self-sufficiency. We're looking for active participants in the process of governance. We at Boeing believe that everyone can be a leader. The next bullet point, the ability to effectively communicate and interact with others. As mentioned on the previous slide, that is crucial for us. Of course, everyone has to have the skill sets when they come out of university, but when you're working for a company like Boeing, you're consistently challenged to think. And we need people like that who are willing to take up that challenge. I love the fourth bullet point. I think it's great. We're looking for people who have a passion to learn, unlearn, and relearn. We're not looking for static people. We're looking for people who are looking to continue to grow and challenge. And finally, we're looking for people who are going to focus on the future. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them during the Q&A section. Thank you.
Everybody, as my other speakers have said, I'd like to thank everybody who's part of the organizing group here for all the warm hospitality. And really congratulations. I think it's a very successful first conference on this particular topic. When Chuly first called me and said, let's take a look at what we can talk about for this, obviously, as she mentioned, we were looking primarily at how companies would respond to their own response to the aging population issue or the aging demographic issue of their workforce. But really, the perspective I'd like to give, and my other colleague Pratik will be talking about later, is how the countries who do not have this problem can actually help the countries with this problem. So I decided to choose as my title, Sunrise Opportunities for Sunsetting Demographics, which I think would be really appropriate for the topic this afternoon. Really, I just have three main themes. I'll talk briefly about demographic transitions in Asia, and I think I won't go into much detail here because the other speakers have already done this, as well as some of the presentations yesterday. I'll talk a little bit about the demographic dividend for the Philippines, and my friend and colleague here, John Haley, mentioned this in his speech yesterday. And I'll talk about the new opportunities for our group, the AYALA Corporation. If we look at some of the aging, the population structure in Asia, here's just a different way of looking at this. Whereas you can see the Northern Asian and OECD countries have a population greater than 40 that's really close to 50%. On the lower end of the spectrum, you can see that India and the Philippines only has around 20% of its population over 40. This is according to Asian demographics. It will actually become even worse as the growth of the labor forces widely diverge over the next 20 years. And as you can see on the left of that red line, really this is generally the developed part of Asia has really very low growth rates of its labor force. And on the right side, which is largely ASEAN economies, you still have fairly healthy growth in their labor forces. What's driving this? Well, I thought it might be good to just show how the shape of the demographics curves actually differ. On the top left is Hong Kong. I just chose Hong Kong as an example. And as you can see, it has a wave pattern where the declining young and the increasing old in the older, more affluent societies, largely in Northern Asia, what's happening is the shift. It's actually flattening in the wave, the tail end of the wave down below. Let me just see if I can show it here. Over here is actually increasing tremendously, and these are the the older populations. So as you can see, the shift is moving fairly dramatically from 1985 to 2005 in red and 2025 in green. On the other hand, the country where I'm coming from, as you can see down below, is essentially what we're calling a landslide. As you can see, the whole graph shifts almost on all fronts equally across all the age populations as you go from that same period of 1985, 2005, and 2025. So this is really what we're trying to capture now in terms of what are the opportunities of this population growth. By the way, the Philippine population is currently at 85 million. By 2025, it's projected to hit 110 million. So even that, in terms of absolute numbers, the actual population growth will be significantly rapid. Another way of looking at that is that, as you can see here, just looking at the various age groups, the one in the middle, from 2005, those from 15 to 64 years old, which is really the current working age population, is going to go from 62% to around 68% over the next 20 years. And even if we look at our more advanced population in terms of age of 65 and above, it's not going to hit more than 10% in that same period. So again, and if you factor in the fact that we are adding 25 million people in the workforce over that same period, I mean, in terms of absolute numbers, that is a significant opportunity for us as a country. So, let's take a look at what this means in terms of the demographic dividend that I talked about. Really, to economists and demographers, such a structure can present opportunities for economic growth. Nations with such a demographic structure may enjoy a boost to income growth because of the higher share of the working population, the accelerated accumulation of capital, and the reduced spending on their dependents. This, if combined with effective public policies, can really stimulate economic growth. The key study of this was actually authored by Harvard professor David Bloom, and he wrote about when he wrote the demographic dividend. And this is really what we're trying to capture now. So with this, our country is actually looking at how we can really emulate what had happened in the earlier part to the East Asian economic miracles. As you can see, South Korea is way on top. In terms of annual per capita GDP growth over the from 1960 to 1990. This demographic transition was matched by real per capita income growth during that period. The dividend alone is estimated to account for approximately 1/4 to 2/5 of this growth. It is this same transition that is pushing China and India into the forefront of economic development over the last couple of decades. And now that Dr. Bloom believes that the next 20 to 15 years could be the turn of Southeast Asia, particularly Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, and the Philippines. The foundations for this, if we are to reap any of the benefits, is that we need to open our markets, have more flexible labor policies, and to draw manufacturing and service jobs, and the need for sound economic policies and financial systems to promote investment and savings. The other investment that we as a country are now seriously trying to look at is investing in education to boost skills as well as in healthcare. So what has this opportunity presented for us? First of all, the rise of what we're calling overseas Filipino workers. For many of you who have been traveling in almost all continents of the world, we do have a lot of overseas workers now, precisely as a cog for the new global economy. They're prized not only for their industry and dedication, but also for their skills and proficiency. As of December 2003, the estimate that we have is we have around 10% of our population, of our full population, really working now outside the country. And many of these are in jobs on both contract labor, on the left, which are caregivers, house helpers, seamen, hotel and cruise staff, entertainers, and construction workers, but now more recently towards professionals. We have a lot of doctors, nurses, engineers, teachers, and accountants that are now being exported, if you will. The main push factors in the last 2 decades were really the economic conditions back home, when most of these overseas workers were driven by economics, where they work a few years abroad, return with enough savings to buy a home and set up their own business. Largely, these were contract labor oriented. More recent trends have been really influenced by pull factors. The aging workforces need more caregivers and medical professionals, for example. My co-speaker here from Japan, we were talking about a recent memorandum of agreement signed by our governments to supply nurses now in Japan over the next few years. I'll talk about this a little bit more in the next slides. The other thing is there's very attractive immigration policies now for residencies of some of these professionals. So not to be outdone, what we've been doing, for example, in our, and I'll just, it's not in my comments, but I'll just make that comment now. We have a construction company because of our real estate arm. And one of the trends that we've been looking at when I first joined the group about a year ago was that we were losing a number of our construction engineers and construction workers overseas, largely to the Middle East, most of them to Dubai. As you know, for those who do construction, there's a lot of Korean construction companies there because of all the activity that's going on in the Middle East. Well, instead of just losing it, one of the suggestions I made, if we can't beat them, let's join them. And so what we did was we created actually an overseas Filipino placement agency to place our engineers abroad ourselves, and then with the promise that after a 2 to 3 year contract, they'll come back and return back to our own organization as part of our own labor pool. So not only do we have a more skilled labor force that's going overseas, we now have actually a robust business of sending some of our own workers abroad. And what it has done is that it has now attracted a lot more of the other construction workers from other companies because we're the only company that actually has this kind of arrangement of contracts labor supply. So again, this one presented an opportunity for us immediately, and it is actually, like I said, now one of a strong businesses within our construction group. Well, let me focus specifically on a couple of things. And that is about sunrise, what I call the sunrise sectors as a result of this phenomenon. One has been, and it's been mentioned a couple of times even by the speaker this morning about, I can't remember, was it Dr. Halal who said that if he was, no, Dr. McLean, that said if he calls for a call center, the first question he asks is, where are you from? And the first impulse would be to come from the Philippines. Well, if we look at this right now, between 2003 to 2004, although it's still a small number, it's actually been 100% growth in terms of seats, call center seats. And by the way, on a 24/7 shift, that one seat actually translates into 3 jobs. So the seats actually just physically describe the chairs that they're actually using, but the employment that it generates is usually a factor of 2 to 3 is to 1 per seat. So that gives you an idea of the number of seats that it goes. So this is the baseline, and although you can see India has their 29%, the Philippines has 6% in 2003, the projection over the next, just up to the end of this year alone, is to grow almost 3-fold to almost 70,000 seats in a span of 3 years from that base. And again, so this is with a factor of 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, this actually generates quite a bit of employment. Call centers is not the only one that's being outsourced to the Philippines. And if you look at this, we looked at various cyber services. The first line here is the contact centers, which I've talked about. And as you can see, from 2005 to 2010, the estimate is to go from 112,000 to 331,000 jobs with a compounded annual growth rate of 90% over that period. If you look at business process outsourcing, we're looking at an 80% growth. Software development, that's really where India is very strong. That's not as rapid growth for us, only 25%. The other major area for us is medical and legal transcription. And I've actually seen how some of these legal and medical transcription services work. A WAV file is actually sent by email, for those who know their technology. A WAV file is essentially a voice recording of what a doctor may have said as he was making his rounds for his patients. That WAV file is actually then transcribed by a licensed medical transcriber in one part of the Philippines. When that is done, the WAV file plus the transcripts are actually sent to a quality control center in another part of the Philippines, all electronic, and it goes to 2 to 3 quality control checks before it is shipped back to the US. This whole process takes 4 hours between the time that the WAV file is actually sent electronically to the time it gets back to the US in transcribed form that now goes into the medical file of that patient that was just seen. So if you look at just how that process, it's just mind-boggling how halfway around the world this is being done. And like I said, that is expected to grow for us in our country by around 80%. Animation, well, Korea is known for this as well, but Korea and the Philippines are really the cartoon capitals of the world right now, with a lot of animation work being done. And of course, there's engineering design as well. But roughly, the bottom line here is that from an estimate of 2005 of around 160,000 jobs, by the year 2010, that would have generated almost some 5-fold increase, more than a 5-fold increase to more than 1 million jobs for the country. And as you can look at the revenue numbers, it's going to generate from $2 billion in 2005 to over $12 billion in revenues for the country in that period alone. So again, this is one of those industries where because some of the countries in the world are running out of workers, this is where they're going. This is where the jobs are going. Shifting gears now to healthcare, if I look at healthcare for a minute, global healthcare expenditures are around $3 trillion. The US alone is $2 trillion of this. In Asia, the healthcare expenditure is estimated at $290 billion, but it is expected to reach $600 billion by 2013. OECD countries are allocating at least 38% of their healthcare budget to the needs of their aging population. And that population is creating opportunities for Asian countries to leverage their strengths and services through cross-border health and wellness services. 629 million people or 60 years and above today in Asia, that's estimated to reach 2 billion by 2050. So what's the driving forces behind movements of consumers for health and retirement? One, I already mentioned, the aging population. The second is the ever-increasing cost of medical services and retirement living in those countries. If you think about it, what happens when many people retire is that they obviously don't have the same purchasing power as when they were in the workforce. And yet their costs of care post-retirement is ever increasing. And that is driving now the opportunities really for looking at other ways for actually enjoying their retirement years. The third main drive here is the shortage of quality healthcare facilities and workers. And as we can already guess from a lot of the presentations, who are going to take care of these elderly and where will they be cared for? Long waiting times for treatment and surgery, as well as inability of fiscal systems to support the aging populations and the high cost of services. So what's happening in the Philippines? Again, just to share with you, the government with the private sector and the academia has now started a health services sector initiative, and the first area is telehealth. Teleradiology, telepathology using store and forward technologies plus medical transcription is now on the rise. What this means is, I already mentioned earlier about WAVE files being transcribed, but we are now, for example, interpreting X-rays, CT scans, and MRI images in the country, again, using forward technology that we're using to do this with a very quick turnaround time. And from the most recent estimates, we have a 99.2% accuracy rate in terms of how these are diagnosed and how these are interpreted. International medical and retirement zones. We're talking about spa tourism, alternative and traditional medicine, cosmetic plastic surgery, and retirement havens. For Korea, there was recently an entire golf course in the middle of central Luzon that was just bought out by a Korean conglomerate to convert into a retirement haven. And that is already in the works, and they hope to open this particular complex by the middle of next year. And again, the estimate there is that they will have a huge amount of retirees coming from Korea in the Philippines. The third one is global medical services packages, where we're actually now, because we've created professional registries with both the US, the UK, and Japan, we're looking at transportable health professionals who can train and educate foreign nationals and help develop their own country's local healthcare systems. We are doing this, for example, for the province of Guangdong in China, where they send annually now 1,000 females graduates to learn nursing in the Philippines. And in the process, we send as well 500 nurses to there, and it's an exchange program, so that then they are actually now being trained the world-class nursing facilities, for example, and nursing education that we in the Philippines have. And this is actually related to this one about medical and health sciences education. The last one is cross-border research. There's a lot of clinical research being done, and this is also being outsourced now in our neck of the woods. For example, Johnson & Johnson's, one of its global research facilities is now in the Philippines as well. So, what does this present for us? What I hope I painted is what it's presenting for the country. So now as the country's leading business conglomerate, what is it actually doing for us? First of all, let me do briefly an introduction just on AYALA. We are one of the oldest, the equivalent of your chaebols, where we're in multiple businesses. We have Globe Telecoms, which is the country's #2 telecommunications firm. We have BPI, which is the Bank of the Philippine Islands, which is the country's biggest bank. AYALA Land is the country's premier property developer. And we have an investment banking group called AC Capital, which really invests in startup companies. Two of those startups, Manila Water and IMI, are now publicly listed as well. And then we actually are looking at a few other investments in other industries, which I'll talk about in a while. I mentioned that we have over 40,000 employees primarily in the Philippines, but this is expected to double in the next 3 years with our expansion overseas. But as you can see, even in our group, our average age is 33 years, and this has been going down rather than going up. This used to be 37 3 years ago. It's gone down to 33. Our own projections is it will go down to 31 or 30 over the next 3 years, with the average tenure of 6 years. We have a proven track record of value creation, and these are the companies that we have taken public throughout over the last 5 years. And as you can see, I just wanted to show you again where we've gone into business, or we put on significant investments. Is we have a track record of actually generating tremendous value for our shareholders. So, taking those two examples earlier about cyber services, what we have right now is just to share two of our own initiatives. We have now a BPO holding company called Libit, and the vision is to create a diversified portfolio of BPO and BPO infrastructure companies over the next 5 years. The focus is on high-value services and solutions that require more complex judgment and analysis, because this gives us higher revenue per head. We're looking at blended shore capabilities. For those who understand the language, that means that it is actually a combination of home country, host country, and potentially even a third country. We're collaborating to actually deliver a service, just like the example I gave earlier about medical transcriptions. We're targeting middle market clients and attractive niches that are too small for the larger players. Generally, we're focusing on US, Philippine, or Indian companies. So just to give you an example, these are 3 of our most recent acquisitions, our investments. eTelecare is one of the leading call center companies in the Philippines. It has 12 centers, 7,000 employees, and we recently acquired a significant stake in eTelecare, precisely as our platform now to grow our call center business. 2 weeks ago, we bought a company called Integrion. It's a New York-based company, New York domiciled company with 7 delivery centers in the US, India, and Europe. This one provides document, content, and knowledge management services to the top US investment banks, law firms, publishers, and management consultants. McKinsey, for example, does all their work through Integrion. And the HR Mall is one that I got involved in directly. This is a business I set up, and it is to now have our shared services for HR across the AYALA group to service all our HR needs for the organization. I'm working with Watson Wyatt on this. So, it's still confidential, but we are looking at health services, and we are looking at a particular investment as well in this particular area. And AYALA Land is already looking at creating retirement villages and service communities. So, I just really wanted to wrap up, and for those who can read these characters, you probably are aware of what this means. In the characters it means crisis, but really what it is that it does, while any danger or threat, like the aging demographic presents itself, it does present opportunities for other countries. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time this afternoon, and I'm happy to answer any questions later. Thank you very much.
Students. In India, perhaps some of the challenges which we see, what I heard some of our other speakers speak, is dramatically different from many of the countries what they are facing today. Given the nature of opportunities we have, an extremely young workforce, which many of the panel speakers reflected on in the data, our challenges are also a little different, and accordingly some of our responses to those challenges are also a little different from what we have heard so far. What I'll do is, over the next 15-20 minutes, we'll try and walk you through the experience of our own organization, Wipro, which in many a manner is representative of what we are seeing in the Indian demographic changes and shifts, and how we as an organization, we have been trying to leverage and get the benefit of this opportunity, which the current demographic situation in the country is providing to us. Very quickly on the agenda, We have spoken, and you would have perhaps seen many of the slides talking about some of the statistics around India and many other countries. I'll perhaps just take you a step closer to those data. A little more about Wipro, so that you understand some of the challenges which we have given the nature of our industry and our own workforce. Some of the changing trend implications on organizations like us and how we are coping with it, and as well as some of our own initiatives to get the benefit of those opportunities out there. This is something that has been touched on. When I think about demographics, to me, beyond just the aging demographics as a statistic, there are a whole lot of other parameters which go into giving you a complete picture about the demography of a country. It's about age, it's about literacy, it's about gender, it's about the education shift, it's about the migration from rural to urban, it's the kind of economic shift which we are seeing in the economy. This particular slide just touches on some of those key statistics. We have today more than 25% of people who belong in the urban India. Mind you, this was not the case till about a few years back. Till about 2 decades back, almost 85% of our population used to be in the rural settings, which used to contribute maximum to our economy. Our literacy rate has been growing, and so have been the life expectancy rate, still not anywhere close to some of the figures which you heard from many of our speakers. What you would have already heard of, we are an extremely young country in terms of the age demographics. We have the average age in the country, which is projected by year 2020, will be 29 years. And the working population will continue to grow over the next 2 decades. It's a huge opportunity for us. And what is projected is by year 2035, 68% of the country will be the working population, perhaps the largest working population in the world. So that's an opportunity which we have as a country. In terms of education, today morning I was glancing through some report which came my way, that India perhaps produces almost 25 to 30% of the graduating engineering graduates every year across the globe. That's a big number. You look at the number of universities, we have upwards of about 1,500 colleges. We have 480,000 engineering students who keep passing out every year from the various colleges. The medium of instruction is English, which is an advantage for us given the kind of global opportunity and the kind of countries we operate in. And there has been a focus over a period of time how to actually continue to improve the quality of education which is imparted in many of these institutes. I think it's extremely critical, and you would realize in my subsequent slides that to us is the crux. If we continue to sustain our growth or not, we'll be completely dependent on the quality of education which is imparted in our universities and colleges. In terms of economy, as I shared, till about a few years back, agriculture accounted for more than 55% of our gross domestic product. We were largely an agrarian society, agrarian economy. Today, agriculture accounts for just about 22%. There's been a clear shift to the urban centers, and that migration has happened in a rather seamless manner. The growth in the service sector year on year is to the tune of about 8 to 9%. So you can visualize how things are moving along on the economy front. Just one more slide on the market opportunity, the way we see it. Because of the nature of the population, the age, and a huge burgeoning middle class, there is a growth in the consumer class which has got huge spending ability. Many of these young consumers, the young workforce, they are influenced to a very large degree by many of the multinationals today which are there in the country. Till about 15 years back, India was quite a closed economy. There were not too many multinationals who were working there. But over the last about a decade and a half, there has been that huge economy shift, and we have virtually every other multinationals who are operating out of the country, which have just thrown open the door of opportunities before the young population, and they are today big spenders. If at one point in time, the saving rate in the country used to be as high at about 30–35%. It used to be called the Hindu rate of saving in the country. That's down to more like about 20%. And it's partly because of the influence of how the economic shifts have taken place. But mind you, while all this is going on, we must understand, when we talk about India, it still is a country of huge contrast. So there are people who are extremely rich. You open up the more recent issues of Forbes magazine, you'll get to hear the number of billionaires every year from India are continuing to grow at a very, very rapid pace. Still, there is a significant population which is dependent on agriculture. They are impoverished, they are not as rich to be able to support themselves. And I think the challenge as a country, what we have is that how do we make that migration in a smooth manner? We also believe that that kind of contrast is eventually not good for the society because it creates its own level of tension. So it has to be far more even as a growth than what we have experienced so far. Just a slide on my organization, Wipro, which I belong to. We are predominantly today in information technology. We are one of the leading IT services companies in the world. The data that you see there on the slide talks about $2.4 billion was our financials for last year. This year, perhaps we would be more like about $3.2 billion. Growing at a very, very brisk pace. Our annual growth is to the tune of about 40–45% every year. There are not too many organizations who, given that kind of size, continue to grow at that particular pace. We are listed in New York Stock Exchange. Been in the IT sector for about 25 years. We have about 61,000 people dispersed globally. We are present in about 45 countries with almost 1/4 of our population which is operating out of those countries. This is some of the statistics about Wipro itself, which I used it because I felt it's truly reflective of how we see the rest of the country as well. Our average age in our own company is about 27 years. Our employees with less than 1 year experience, interestingly, is about 35%. So you can think about this is the tenure of employees who have worked in the organization. Less than 1 year is almost about 35%, which means we are hiring in large numbers year after year. The average tenure of the top 100 managers would be about 11 years in the company. A strong education foundation, which I talked about, the gender mix, we have about 24% of our population, which is comprised of females. And we did touch on our employees, and they're spread across nationalities as well as geographies. So what is the implication? You heard about some of the statistics. You also got familiar with what, specific to Wipro, some of those changes which we have experienced. And there are a couple of things which I have listed, which I think from our own experience have been critical, what we see on a day-to-day basis. The first, of course, is how do we manage this paradox of plenty yet scarce? If you hear about 1,500 engineering schools, if you hear about 480 engineers coming out every year, it would give you the impression that perhaps there is abundance in supply of talent and manpower which is coming out of these colleges. While that is true, the question which we need to ask ourselves, how many of them are deployable? And there is an issue of quality, and that's the reason why I stressed on in my previous slide when I talked about the focus on quality in education. Our own estimate, and I may be being a little extreme here, is that not more than about 25–30% of the graduating engineers are immediately deployable in the kind of work which we do. So there is a quality gap which we need to bridge. The next one is growing leadership from within. When you actually hire people in such large numbers, the question is, in a year we hire about 15 to 20,000 employees. Just think about it. To be able to manage them, you require solid, trained leadership and managers. They're not coming from outside. So the only choice you have is, what are the processes, what are the systems which you have set in place in your own organization to be able to groom these leaders who will be able to manage the people and the students who are coming out of colleges and becoming part of your workforce. The third, which I think is extremely critical, is managing the needs of a young workforce. Think about it. 24 years, 25 years, they have huge ability to spend. There is a world of opportunities which is out there. They are really not restricted by opportunities which is within the country, but globally it's available to them. You know, some of the things which they are able to realize for themselves, our generation and our parents' generation were able to get only close to their own retirement. Now this is a generation of people which is very much here and now. They would like to get their own, some of those trappings of material wealth, which is their own vehicle, the four-wheeler, their own house, everything, by the time they turn about 27, 28. If they think they are not able to get by them, then something they have missed out on this big gravy train on which all of us are aboard. So that's the reality, and one implication of that is they would like to see much of what gets paid to them upfront. And it's interesting because we talked about it earlier. While some of the statistics may suggest how do we improve the healthcare plan, how do we improve our pension plan, in India the scenario is a little different. And a little while early in the morning I was sharing with some of my colleagues here. In Wipro, you wouldn't believe it, but last year we had to do away with our own company's pension plan because employees said that they're not interested in the pension plan. Instead, they would like to have the money given to them and they will decide what they will do. And their logic was very simple. The pension contribution or the pension interest what they were getting was to the tune of about 5 to 6% every year. And our stock market is growing at a rate of about 20% every year. So I said, give me that money, I'll invest it everywhere. You don't worry about what I do when I retire. I'll be able to take care of myself. So that's the reality of this generation. The second is about the career aspirations, right? They would like to see the mobility. They would like to continue to grow at a very quick pace. And the challenge for us is that many of these youngsters who are in the mid-30s, early 40s, they're already reaching the pinnacle of where they can, what corporate ladders can provide. And so they are coming around and asking, so what next for me? What is organization doing to be able to continue to show me the career graph which they are not able to see beyond? So that's a challenge which we have within our own organization. The third one is about, the last one is about managing diversity. The nature of the population is changing. We are getting into new geographies and we cannot continue to operate as an Indian organization. The reference still is very much that we are an Indian organization, despite 25% of our population being outside, it's still driven out of Bangalore. How do we make sure that if we are able to, if tomorrow if we have to set a development center in Korea, for instance, how would we be able to attract talent from this geography? What do we tell them? Would they be interested? Would they get excited with the thought of working for a company which is based out of Bangalore? So we've got to be able to manage many of our processes, many of our systems, many of our reward mechanisms, which should have a universal appeal across the geographies. So what are the initiatives, therefore, given the implications which I talked about, which Wipro has been looking at very, very closely? And I'll touch on very quickly over the next 5-7 minutes on these. One is, of course, there is no escape. We have to actually build our organization capabilities, given the huge requirement to continue to ramp up, continue to build talent. Leadership capabilities, how do we groom leaders from within? Knowledge transfer, it's an extremely mobile workforce. They keep moving. Our attrition, that is the employee turnover rate, is to the extent on an average is about 14-15%. It becomes extremely important to be able to retain the knowledge through the right kind of processes within the organizations. And how do we leverage on technology when we have such a young workforce which is dispersed across the world? How do we remain connected despite working in a very, very dispersed model? The great talent hunt, I mean the graph below is, I guess, is indicative of what has been the experience for many of us, not specifically only Wipro in India. In year 2002, we were just about 11,000 employees. In October 6, the most recent data, we are about 61,000 employees. By end of the year, this is a conservative estimate, we would be adding about 15,000 employees as a part of our workforce. Now think about it, this is a challenge. We have to continue to do it on a year after year, year after year. And the news which is not so good for us is that we are not alone. Every other big, large firm which is wanting to gain the benefit of what India has to offer is out there in the universities, in the campuses, in the engineering schools. And there is a mad scramble for talent out there. And we have been investing of our own to be able to get the benefit of it. So we have more than 200 recruiters who are fanning across the length and breadth of the country, being able to figure out where the talent is, which colleges, being able to make our presence felt. We have our online portal which has live database of about 7 million resumes, 700,000 resumes at any given point in time. So that to us is a challenge. While we have a lot of people coming out, I think the big story there is that there are others who are equally ambitious and eager to get the best of talent coming in, and we have to keep improving on this count. Some of our other efforts is around building the industry-academic partnership, which we think is vital for improving the quality of education. our own investment in technical and behavioral training, our own leadership training and capability building processes, and some of our own unique initiatives to be able to improve the quality of education right from primary school level. So we have what we call as the Wipro Applying Thoughts in Schools, where we work along with the school teachers. We are having, as a part of this initiative, about 1,200 schools across the country. And there the focus is, how do we make sure our students, our kids, our children are not driven by rote learning. You know, when they go into the classes, they just go through the textbooks, they learn, they come out, and then they are reproduced in the exams. But they learn what they can retain, and they are able to apply once they grow up and go into the colleges. And it's a hugely successful one, and we are seeing some of the transformation at the school level which is now beginning to happen, and we are extremely proud about this initiative. Industry academic partnership, we have a master's program with some of the leading engineering schools where we co-participate in designing the curriculum. We think, given our experience, we would be able to influence the colleges to be able to work on the curriculum which is more industry relevant. Similarly, we invest a lot in our own internal behavioral training. I was sharing with Chuly in the morning. We have 165 full-time training faculty. These are all professors who are teaching in universities who are part of our workforce. On any given day, we can be training about 5,000 people in a single day across our classrooms. And our utilization of our training facility is upwards of about 90%. So you can think about kind of effort which is going in just training our people on a day-to-day basis, on an ongoing basis. And then the last one is about building leadership capabilities. So we have a view of what are those qualities which we need, and our programs are aligned to be able to make sure, depending on what roles people are performing, they're equipped with the right kind of leadership talent. The last two slides, knowledge transfer to us is extremely important. If we do not have the right kind of processes which are able to retain the knowledge within the organization, the customers, it's not going to build trust with them. They are trusting us with their mission critical applications. They are trusting us with some of their core technology, and they would like to know that every time there is an employee exit, the knowledge is not walking away with that employee. So we have invested a lot in collaboration forums, our knowledge portals, and we have tried creating a culture of contributing. So when I go back, for instance, to India, I will be sharing about the experience of this one day with my own colleagues on the knowledge portal, and I'll be capturing it. And that over a period of time becomes the culture of the workplace, where people archive their own learning, which is there for future use by the rest of the organization. And the last one is leveraging technology, which is not too difficult to understand. Average age of the workforce, 27 years. They're dispersed across. They have a huge need to remain connected with the organization, spread across 40 countries. The only way we can do it by leveraging on technology. And what you see there, as I mentioned, Channel W, it's our employee portal, which has contributed immensely to not only in productivity improvement, but also in just strengthening teamwork and communication across. So, you know, twice or thrice a year, we will get on to those webcasts where all the senior leadership across the organization, we have those message forums. So in a way, while you are away, dispersed, you continue to remain connected in a very unique manner and give them a feel of belonging to an organization while they are at client size, while they are across the globe. So this is what I thought in summary I'll share with you, and hopefully it should have given you the glimpse of some of the unique challenges what we have as a country, and more particularly us in Wipro, and how we are going about managing it. I'll hand over the floor here to Chuly, and we will be more than happy to take your questions. Thank you.